Let's talk today about the best audio settings for Rebirth, as well as how to actually use audio to your advantage. Look, I think that's more important than anything, learning how to actually use it to your advantage. So I'm going to be giving you 3 tips so that you can start to use audio to your advantage more to get more kills. Now, when we start off talking about settings, we of course have to start off with the audio mix, which is one of the hottest topics ever. Do you run boost high? Do you run boost low? Do you run boost? In my opinion, it really depends on your headset, which I know isn't the most straightforward answer, but I want to be honest with you. For me, it is boost high. For other people that I know and I'm very close with, it's actually boost low, and it really depends on that headset. So I would highly recommend either dropping in a Plunder or dropping in a Clash and trying out both to see what works best for you. Now, one of the biggest tips that I have for you when it comes to audio settings that's different than what a lot of people would tell you is the master volume right here, which I actually have set to 60, and here's why. The master volume is the global volume. That is really the volume of everything. It's the plane flying in, it's precision airstrikes, cluster strikes, footsteps, shots being fired. It's really everything. So I actually put that down to 60, and the reason is that is going to lower the volume of things like precision airstrikes, cluster strikes, and the plane flying in. We've all had that situation where you're in bottom prison and you cannot hear a single thing because of a precision airstrike flying in. This is going to help with that. Now, for music volume, turn that all the way down. You don't need any music in game, so just put that at 0. Dialogue volume, I have set to 60. Why? I still want to be able to hear things like enemy flying in overhead, enemy UAV overhead, but I don't want him to be yelling in my ears. I still want to be able to hear things going on around me. Now, when it comes to effects volume, this is stuff like your footsteps, like your shots being fired. So we need to keep that up at 100, right? We want to be able to hear those things clearly. And the fact that we have that at 100 and global volume at 60 allows us to hear those things a little bit clearer. This is also going to allow you to turn the volume in your headset up a little bit higher and not feel like you're actually going deaf because of precision airstrikes. So those are kind of the volume settings. Just one other thing that I really want to highlight for you, going to the bottom here, voice chat and microphone volume, that's all kind of based on your headset. You don't want your teammates being too loud. The only thing I would say here is war tracks as passenger, make sure you have that disabled. So overall, that's what I'm working with in terms of settings. PC players, I have one more quick thing for you before we jump into the breakdown and talk about tips. Console players, go ahead and fast forward to where I go over 3 tips so that you can start to use audio to your advantage more. Now, PC players, we're actually going to change these settings just a little bit. We're actually going to set our master volume to 80, and here's why. Next up, we're going to download an application called SoundLock, and what SoundLock does is limit the maximum output of sound that your PC is going to give you in your headset. And why this is so great is because we can really turn up the volume of our headset to hear those footsteps, to hear those shots being fired, but when a precision airstrike comes in and would usually be deafening to you, SoundLock is going to limit the maximum output of that, meaning it's not going to be as loud in your headset. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but it's really going to allow you to turn up the volume in your headset and hear things like footsteps and shots a little bit quicker. Now let's go ahead and jump into the 3 tips that I mentioned about how to use audio to your advantage. So now that you have your audio settings squared away, let's talk about the 3 tips that I have for actually using audio. How can you really use audio to your advantage to get better awareness and start getting more kills? We're going to be doing a hybrid breakdown as usual. I'm going to be giving you the 3 tips while jumping in at certain points throughout this gameplay to really break it down and see how those tips apply. Moments when I actually hear footsteps and hear different things, which let's go ahead and start there. Let's talk about footstep audio. Look, Warzone footstep audio is not the best. It's improving, it's gotten better, but where footstep audio really struggles is directional audio. Understanding, is somebody above you, is somebody below you, where exactly is that person when you are hearing those footsteps? My biggest tip for that is to never rely on the directional audio. Once you actually hear footsteps, you're using footstep audio to actually understand that somebody's around you, right? So you're roaming around bottom prison, you hear footsteps, but you're not totally sure where. At that point, you have to go about centering and anticipating people around every corner. You really see how I'm centering my crosshairs here, trying to figure out where exactly this guy is. I know he's floating around here, but I'm just centering my crosshairs, trying to figure out where exactly he's moving to. So that's kind of the biggest tip that I have for you when it comes to footstep audio, is understand that somebody is around you based on those footsteps, but once you do, you have to center and anticipate around every single corner and think about where that person could potentially be until you run into them. Right there, same thing, right? So I'm centering around the corner, I kind of hear him, so I center this way, I don't see him, so I center this way. Now I go ahead and I challenge. Now let's go ahead and use this as an opportunity to segue into tip number 2, which is shots being fired. This is one of the biggest ways that you can get an advantage on teams and get information, is hearing shots fired. Now, I don't really think there's any issue with shots being fired. I think gunshots are very clear to hear in Rebirth, because of the closer range of the map, you can hear shots being fired from everywhere. Now, the first thing you have to understand with shots being fired is the obvious. There are two teams fighting. Two teams are shooting at each other. That's why you're hearing shots fired. So when you push into that situation, you have to be careful. And then, of course, go about using your footsteps to figure out where people may be, of course, centering and anticipating. Right here, we're going to go ahead and get this down. This is a great example of kind of shooting and footsteps, right? I see shooting below me, so I'm going to go ahead and challenge this way. Now, as I am anticipating around this corner, I catch this guy pushing up the stairs. By the way, if you are subscribed to me and saw my short the other day, I did a great breakdown of this, but if you're looking to get better, just consider subscribing. We're going to go ahead and push up. So two things to note there, and I specifically made that a little bit louder for you. I hear the footsteps to my left of the guy that I saw. I also hear the shots fired to my right. So now I challenge this guy, and I'm going to go ahead. I don't get the down right there, so I immediately refocus to him. I get the down. Now we're able to go ahead and get the down right there. And I'm going to be quiet for another second to let you hear the footsteps of the third guy who is running up. Right, so I know he's pushing. I'm not totally sure where. Of course, there I see him. So now I go ahead, challenge around the corner, quick reach out thanks to Combat Scout, makes that a super easy re-challenge right there. And that's kind of how I use both of those, right? So I use footstep audio to understand that people around me. I use shots being fired to understand what level they're on and, where are the other enemies. And I use both of those combined on top of anticipation and centering to really start to get more kills, take less damage. And we're going to go on a nice little run here. I think this is a 20-something kill win. Now, unfortunate situation right here. Obviously, two teams fighting to my right. I don't know that there's another team here, which kind of leads us into point number 3, which is don't really rely on audio. Look, I said it in the beginning, and we all know it. By the way, footsteps. Right, so there's footsteps all around me right there. There's people behind me down below. There's people up top. So I'm just trying to get my bearings again, get replated, and then we can go back into this fight. And of course, the radar jammer makes it a little bit tougher because I can't exactly rely on shots being fired in terms of using the mini-map, right? A lot of Vanguard guns are not silenced, meaning when you hear shots fired, check that mini-map, same thing, shots fired right there. We're able to get the down, and we're going to see a lot of shots being fired here where I can use that audio to my advantage. That's kind of one of the biggest that not a lot of you are using to your advantage. Another thing is dialogue. I'm not specifically going to talk about that, but, I hear enemy flying in or something along those lines. I'm able to go ahead and know that somebody's around me. We're able to get the down right there. So going back to point number 3 is, look, I said, and we all know that Warzone audio is not the best. So the more situations that we can basically avoid having to rely on audio, the better we're going to be. Now, how do we do that? Well, as I mentioned, video in and video out is keeping UAVs up. The only time, if you have a UAV up, the only time that you're going to get killed by audio is if somebody is third-partying you and ghosted, right? Where you don't see them on the minimap. Any other time, by the way, shots being fired, so we're going to go ahead and push in here. I know that there's two teams. I'm going to be quiet for a second. You're going to hear the footstep audio. So that's a situation right there where I see one person, but I hear a second enemy. So that's something, going back to tip number 1, that we can use. Obviously, door shut. We're going to get this guy. Once again, footstep audio. I hear them chasing me on top of using the minimap. So you can hear them chasing me behind. So I'm just going to keep moving. I'm not in a good spot just yet. We're going to go in and get back in this fight. But, the more we can use our mini-map to our advantage in terms of getting kills, keeping UAVs up, the less we have to rely on audio, and we don't have those deaths where it's like, I didn't know that person was there, I didn't know that person was challenging me, because they're actually on the mini-map. And we're going to see that a little bit coming up here in a second. Nice little reach out, bunny hop, right? Well, I didn't really bunny hop, I hit the wall, but we get the down. Notice the last one, so I'm going to go ahead, pull back a little bit here. We're going to reposition. We're going to farm that last guy so we can keep him alive. Still a really good lobby. 13 kills. Second circle just finished closing. We've got 6 other teams still alive. We're in a good spot. Trying to give that guy a little bit longer to let his teammates fly back in, and then we're going to go ahead and push. Now, what am I pushing based on? Right here, I'm pushing based on anticipation, but I'm going to get audio in a second. Shots fired. Shots fired above. I know he's right up there. I'm able to go ahead and challenge. Where's the teammates? He's right to my left. I get really lucky. I almost missed the door, but I'm able to stim and get away. And again, I'm just looking to farm that team. Now I'm listening for audio right here, listening for footsteps. Obviously in decon, there's certain places that audio is really good. Decon is one of them because you hear the metal. You hear them running on the metal, which is a huge advantage. Especially right there when I'm plating up, I can hear if that guy's pushing or not. And that's where I'm using footstep audio. Now, what happens if you get killed by a guy who has dead silence? It is what it is. There's not much you can do about it. Even information's a little bit tough there because that guy's running faster than the information's pinging. So a lot of times, because of the speed boost with Deddy, so a lot of times you can't really do anything about that. Now, one more ping right here. Then I'm going to go ahead and push in. And notice that I don't need to necessarily use audio to my advantage there because I have the mini-map pings, but I will in a second. So we're going to go ahead and push up, trying to see what I can find. I know that I need to get replated, but audio's not playing a factor right here because I have the information that I need on the mini-map. So this is tip number 3, using it to your advantage. Now, what about a situation that I'm about to run into right here where there is no audio, right? So I'm challenging down below, and this is going to be an interesting situation. There are certain times you just can't do anything about it. You're going to run into a situation where there's a guy like this that's literally just sitting in a corner, not moving. It was right in between UAV pings, a little bit of unfortunate COD timing right there. That guy's not making any audio noise. He's not making any noise. So you know what? There's not much I can do. We're going to listen for this audio cue again of footsteps. Right here, after I replate, he's going to come pushing down the hill, kind of from the water tower buy station. Yep. So there, notice that I hear the footsteps. I'm not totally sure exactly where he is. So I go ahead and anticipate around that corner. He ends up being there. We're able to execute and get that down in thirst. So that's where we start to see really using audio, especially footstep audio, to understand that people are around us, and then we have to anticipate and center. Should you anticipate and center around every single corner? Absolutely. You should be getting to a point where that, especially as you're improving, where that is second nature to you, where it really feels so easy. Look at this STG. Oh, baby. The STG is nasty. It's still nasty. So, you know, I would recommend using it. Depending on when you're watching this, it is currently June 12th. So if you are watching this a few months down the road, it might have been nerfed at that point, but at the time it was nasty. So look, at the end of the day, I think the biggest thing in terms of audio is really using kind of the 2 main sources of audio. Your footstep audio to understand that people are around you, and also understand when there's 2 teams around you. You can really start to figure out and piece together, you know, that there's multiple people and maybe even multiple teams around you based on that footstep audio, based on hearing multiple things. Just a quick cue right there. Obviously, somebody just bought back over there. You hear things like loadout markers being dropped. You hear things like buy stations. Notice tip number 2 right here, shots being fired, 2 teams fighting over this way. So I'm going to go ahead and push into third party this a little bit. It's a great opportunity to third party. We're still playing that patient on the approach game though, right? As I always talk about, patient on the approach, we get the information, then we start to reposition and do what's next. I get the down and thirst right there. I notice one's ghosted behind me, so we're going to go ahead and challenge this way. We're able to get guy number 2. We got 21 kills right there. We've got 3 other teams, 2 other teams still up, 3 other enemies, so it's definitely a 2v2v1 at this point. Trying to see what I can find. I hear one down below. And I go about clearing this way to try to see. Right there around the corner, we get the hip fire with the Blixen. Hip fire your SMGs as much as possible. Now we get information, right? One up top, one over to my left in the little tunnel. So as soon as I'm replated, I'm ready to go. This is one thing that I want to talk about, playing with momentum, acting on that information as quick as possible. Right here, the longer that I wait to act on this information, the more it is going to change. Meaning this guy could start pushing back into decon. He could make a gas play. The sooner I can get in there and challenge him, the better off I'm going to be. So we go ahead and re-challenge that using cover. We get the down and thirst. Unfortunate situation where I tried to make too much of a play here. I see the guy pushing me on my level. I had already committed to the cluster because then it would have kind of held off the tunnel a little bit. He would have run right into it, but he actually beat me to the tunnel. And what's going to end up happening is here, I'm going to go down. I'm going to end up getting thirsted. TCAP's going to go ahead and buy me back. Thankfully, it's a little bit cheaper to buy back. Now it's only 3,000 instead of 4,000. If you didn't know that, now you do. But we're going to go ahead and challenge this last guy in the tunnel. Use audio to your advantage. 3 tips: footstep audio, shots being fired. Don't rely as much on audio if you can get UAVs up, as I always say. Let's get better today, and I will see you tomorrow.